look, there is evidence that depression is a lot of different things. It's one term that covers all sorts of different disorders with all sorts of pathways. And there is evidence that one of the functions of antidepressants is anti-inflammatory, and that depression is an inflammatory condition, and that it's associated with autoimmune dysfunction. And so, who knows how prevalent that is? I mean, it's more prevalent than people thought 20 years ago. This science, independent of my opinion and my daughter's opinion, independent of that, there's evidence for autoimmune involvement in the pathophysiology of depression. The degree to which that's a contributor to what degree that contributes to depression in the general population is unknown. I think your best bet in life is to shoulder your suffering and to take responsibility and to move forward. But that doesn't mean that you're not vulnerable on all sorts of fronts. It's just your best tactic. Just because it's your best tactic doesn't mean it will always work, but you don't have a better tactic. So, you know, one of the things we constantly told my daughter was not to ever use her illness as an excuse. Mostly because it would blur the lines between her and the illness. You don't ever want to do that. You know, so we wanted her to be as responsible as she could be. What she had to endure, it was a very difficult thing to figure out. If you have a kid that's sick like that, it's like, well, they don't want to get up to go to school. Well, you probably wouldn't want to get up either if you were like in pain, lots of pain. What do? You say you stay in bed? Or do you say, get the hell up if you can and get out, because the alternative is worse? And so pushed her and encouraged her to bear as much as she could. And I would say that was the right strategy, because she did manage to have as much of a life as she could have under the circumstances. And she's come through all this with her character intact. So, which I think is really quite beyond belief to me, but it still seems to be the case. So it isn't that shouldering your suffering and bearing the responsibility for your life is a panacea, because we're vulnerable to all sorts of things that happen to us that are, in some sense, ultimately uncontrollable. I mean, that's why people die, right? But it doesn't matter in the face of that. There still isn't a better strategy.
Me out of my state.
Yeah, I say, could you pull me out of this alive? Meaning anyone, right?
Exactly.
Or me, could you, can I, right? Where's my body? I'm stuck in my mind. When I get stuck in that, like, that trauma response feedback in my brain, I have no concept of my body at all. I'm completely in my head. And then I say, I'm tired of screaming at the top of my lungs, things I used to do upstairs before I'd come down into the studio with Blood Pop. I'm in the hole, I'm falling down, so down. My name isn't Alice, but I'll keep looking for Wonderland. So it's kind of this, it's this weird experience where I'm going, I'm not sure I'm gonna make it, but I'm gonna try. And that's where the album really begins. And we put it together in this way, but that string arrangement, Chromatica 1, Act 1, it's essentially setting the stage for like a more cinematic experience with this world that is how I make sense of things. How do I make sense of myself when I feel this way? By going, this is a mental issue. I radically accept that I have it. And although I feel completely disconnected and offline, I am still going to pursue Wonderland. I'm still going to look for something that I do not have right now. And maybe it is through just simply trying. I think that being brave is hard, but it's synonymous in many ways with trying.
Motivation, action, enthusiasm, faith, these are the states of mind which are associated with a positive mental attitude. Habits. You're the sum total of your habits, whether they be habits you have developed with purpose or forethought, or habits you have allowed to creep upon you by neglect to form your own. A successful, well-balanced, and well-rounded out life is the result of ordered habits and never the result of chance or neglect. Positive habits can live and thrive only in the mind which has been conditioned with a positive mental attitude. And your other self. Each human being is a plural, not a singular being. One of these beings is negative, the other is positive. And there is a battle from birth until death between these two as to which will dominate. Usually the power is about evenly divided between the positives and the negatives. Often the negative takes over completely and makes of the individual a subject of irritation to himself and to all others around him. The development of a positive mental attitude is the first step which one must take in order to give the positive self full and complete control over the negative self. Then one has truly taken possession of his own mind and is able to direct it to whatever ends he may desire, thus fulfilling the purpose of the Creator in having given man complete control over but one thing, and that is his own mind. I think of all the facts that I have examined in life, that is the most fabulous, the most far-reaching, and the most significant, that the Creator has given man control over but one thing, and one thing only, and that is the right to use his thinking positively or negatively. Eternal vigilance is the price that one must pay to maintain a positive mental attitude because of these and other natural opposites of positive thinking, such as your negative self constantly maneuvers for power over you. You can feel that. You don't need to take my word for it. You felt it in the past. You may not have defined the feeling properly, but very well, if there is something going on within you constantly in the nature of a negative thought, then your accumulated fears, doubts, and self-imposed limitations, which came over with you when you came from the other side, they're constantly standing in the way of a positive mental attitude. Then the negative influences near you, including people who are negative, and especially sometimes the people with whom you work or the relatives with whom you are associated. And perhaps some inborn negative traits which you brought over with you at the time of birth. These also can be transmuted into positive traits. Worries over the lack of money and the lack of progress in your business, profession, or calling in life. I don't know of anything that can pull the rug out from under one quicker than worries over the lack of money. You can get too much money in life. You can also get too little. Somewhere in between the two extremes is the proper place to stop. I have a motto which says, not too much, not too little. And that goes not only for money, it goes for everything. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to maintain a well-ordered and a well-balanced